everyone. This video we are going to summarize chapter 5, which is on the why and how did Germany lost World War II? How did Germany get defeated in World War II? Okay, and okay, so you can see in this study is possibly a sample question. Okay, was the entry of the USA in 1941 the main cause of Germany's defeat? So entry of the USA in 1941 is one of the causes of Germany's defeat. You'll see in this chapter there are at least two other big factors, and we'll basically need you to understand what are the factors about and how did they cause the defeat. So you have to explain the logic. Okay, so we have learned that in the last chapter in 1939, how did we end up with the outbreak of World War II in Europe? And we also know that on the Allied side we have Britain and France. And later on in this chapter, you see that the Soviet Union and the USA will join on the side of the Allies. And you will need to maybe explain how they also play a role in defeating Germany. Okay, and other things you might need to know later is, although the USA was not involved at the start of the war, it played a significant part in the course of the war. Okay, and we're going to examine, okay, how big of a deal was the entry of the USA in defeating Germany, or were there other important factors as well? Okay, so okay, this news you can see that Germany decided to attack Poland. Okay, and this marks the start of the World War II in 1939. Okay, but within 6 years, okay, Germany will be defeated and Hitler will be dead. Okay, how do we turn from such a strong Germany to a defeated Germany? Okay, what were the things that happened in between? All right, war in Europe ends. Okay, you can see some of the famous generals of the Allies are celebrated here for their role in defeating Germany. Okay, including one very famous General Eisenhower here, was basically the supreme commander of the Allied forces in Europe. Okay, all right, this is a very important slide. Okay, I need you guys to understand that there are three big factors. Okay, the role of the USA in defeating Germany, Germany's own miscalculation and weakness in defeating Germany, as well as how the allies, the other allies, including the British, including the Soviet Union, as well as the other groups in Nazi-occupied countries, how did they resist to create and influence Germany's defeat? Okay, so you can see that they are role by different people, and besides being able to explain how each of them contributed to Germany's defeat, if you are already familiar with these points, the next level you have to compare which one is perhaps a bigger factor. All right, so let's look at how the USA defeated Germany. How has USA helped to defeat Germany? Okay, so recall we learned in chapter 1 that the USA always traditionally had a very isolationist stance. They did not want to get involved in wars that are not concerning them. That's why back in World War I, they did not really even want to join the fight at the beginning, only until when the Allies basically pleaded for them that USA joined on their side. And you also remember that the USA did not join the very important grouping called the League of Nations because the USA did not want to get involved in the war. So ever since then, the USA, okay, has not been very keen on minding Europe's business. So when Hitler started invading European countries, the USA at first was still very apathetic towards it. They didn't really care about it. Okay, that's why I call it isolationist. And the USA wants to isolate itself from Europe's business. Okay, but the USA, although they were not directly involved in the fighting, they were somehow helping the Allies in the fight against Hitler. All right, so before 21st September 1939, the USA had a cash and carry policy. This means that when Britain and France want to buy things from USA, especially like weapons or things that are very important for war fighting, okay, the USA at first wanted Britain and France to pay them in full, and they wanted, you want to buy something, you got to carry it home yourself. Okay, they have to pay in cash, What does this mean? This means it was difficult, it was more difficult, it was more costly to buy from USA. Okay, so at first USA was making it a bit difficult for the Allies to buy very important supplies to fight Germany. Okay, but the stance soon changed. By 1940, Britain's resources were very near exhaustion, and the British, the Allies, were really desperate for help. And USA, at first, they made it very difficult to buy from the USA. USA changed it from the cash and carry policy to the Land-Lease Act. Okay, so the Land-Lease Act basically means you want to buy from USA, you can pay later. If you can pay later, what does this mean? You do not need to pay in cash. It means it's easier to buy from USA now. So USA can very quickly lend the Allies a lot of very important supplies, weapons, oil to fight Germany. Remember, by 1940, Germany was expanding very powerful. Britain was under threat. They were a bit desperate. So the USA made it easier. And by making it easier, we are giving credit to the USA for helping to resist Germany and later eventually defeating Germany. Okay, so at the early start, Germany might have won Britain if the USA chose to not do nothing or continue to make it very difficult for them for the Allies to get help from the US. Okay, so they changed their policy, making it easier for the Allies to buy from the USA important supplies. Okay, we won't watch this video, but the USA at first was just doing business with the Allies to help them in the war, fighting indirectly. Okay, that's why I call it indirect involvement. But after the US was attacked herself by Japan, Japan was the friend of Germany. So Japan attacked US. Germany also ended up declaring war on the US. So the US now gets involved in the war, direct involvement in Europe. Okay. So there's this pact, okay, between Germany, Italy, Japan. So Japan declare war on USA, USA declare war on Japan. Germany is the friend of Japan, will come in and defend Japan and declare war on USA as well. So the USA got involved in fighting Germany. Okay, that's how it happened. Okay, so now that the USA is directly involved, okay, the USA is able to, we don't even need to talk about landing now, okay, because the USA is directly fighting with all the resources it has. So the USA was a very big part of defeating Germany because it has a lot of resources, oil, steel, things that you need, things to make weapons, to fight a war. They have, very importantly, manpower. When you talk about manpower, we're talking about soldiers. We can supply a lot of soldiers, a lot of pilots, a lot of seamen to go and fight the wars on all land, sea, and air. Okay, and this helped to create Germany's defeat because at first the ally was very short on all this military power, and now with USA involved, it will help to lead to the Germany's defeat because now with more troops, they can win battles. They can reclaim cities. Germany will lose battle by battle and eventually surrender when there's nothing left. Okay. So in your essay, remember, bolster the explanation a bit. Okay. Tell me more. If the US provide troops, provide manpower, how does it eventually lead to Germany's defeat? Okay. You can say that it helps to, okay, help you fight the wars more effectively. The Allies will not be defeated so easily, and as time goes on, the Germany will lose more and more battles and Germany will ultimately be defeated. Okay, so explain step by step. So you can see some of the resources that the US brought with it to Europe, okay, including manpower, soldiers. Okay, besides providing resources and manpower, the Allies, okay, the USA also contributed military strategies. Think of it as brain power. Okay, the USA had very great generals to help to discuss with the British generals, the French generals, how to defeat Hitler in the best way possible. So they helped to plan various offenses to attack Germany and defeat Germany. So for example, there's Operation Overlord to plan how to reclaim Europe from Germany. Okay. And they also provided strategies so that how they can maybe bomb and attack German cities and Axis military site. Axis is referring to Germany and Italy, of course. So manpower, brain power, and resources. The USA supplied all of that. Okay, so Operation Overlord, if you don't remember Operation Overlord, you want to remember this thing called Normandy. The attack on Normandy. Normandy is in today's France. So you can imagine Normandy is the coastline. Opposite Normandy, there's Britain. Okay, and basically they're sailing from Britain to attack Normandy, which is the kind of almost like the narrowest ocean strait between the two countries. So the USA helped to plan a very complex attack, how to attack from the sea onto land. And remember back then, Normandy in France was all under German rule because Germany has defeated France a few years back. Okay, so they helped to plan the Normandy landings. Okay, so you don't remember Operation Overlord, you can remember Normandy landings as one of the examples. Okay, so there's a video here, you can watch yourself. Okay, all right, so they collaborate. It created a lot of tactical success. So how does it help? It helped to increase German losses, reduce their chance at overcoming Allied force. After a long period of warfare, it will eventually lead to their defeat. So basically, when you explain your essay, how did US involvement lead to Germany's defeat? Remember, explain step by step. What leads to what? Okay, before it leads to Germany's defeat. Okay, one thing happens, losses lead to diminishing chances, leads to prolonged period of warfare, eventually leading to the defeat. Okay, so that's the first factor. We have covered the role of the USA. Now we are going to look at Germany's own undoing, Germany's own miscalculation and weaknesses. And there are a few points A, B, C, D in here. Okay, one more thing before I continue. Okay, you might don't assume that, okay, the essay will test me on either factor 1 and factor 2. And I just need to know maybe one of a few points in the big factor. But sometimes you might want to understand all the factors, all the sub-factors in the factor very well. Why? Because maybe the teacher can ask you, among all the German miscalculation and weaknesses, which is ineffective command structure the biggest weakness? So you have to compare between different weaknesses. So it's also good, perhaps even important, for you to know the sub-factors all quite well. Okay, if I switch back to USA, I can ask you, was the USA's indirect involvement more important than the USA's direct involvement in the war when it comes to defeating Germany? So you have to compare between the two, not compare with Germany's weakness and Allied resistance. So you must know the big factors as well as the sub-factors, right? Because we can test you all at different levels of the content. Okay, all right, let's go to Germany's miscalculation and weaknesses. Okay, so Germany, first of all, has a very ineffective command structure. This thing you just need to remember, there's overlapping authority. Okay, Hitler had the power to make decisions and access all information. So why is that a problem? Okay, because Hitler kept insisting on making decisions that was best left. So there was Hitler involved. There were experienced generals involved. So sometimes the commanders on the ground don't know who to follow. Do we follow Hitler? Do we follow the experienced generals? One is higher ranking than you. One is more experiencing than you. One is very high ranking, but very far away. You don't see Hitler. But the other one is your general you see every day. Who do you follow? Okay, so if you can imagine, it's very hard to decide who you want to follow because of different consideration. You know, if you don't disobey Hitler, maybe Hitler would know. If you disobey the general who see you every day, they might find out and you might get punished. So it's very complicated. And worse still, some people follow Hitler's idea, some people follow general's idea, and there'll be very poor coordination. Okay, so this decision proved to be a mistake, as for example, during the Battle of Britain and the invasion of Soviet Union that caused Germany to sustain a war on both fronts. Okay, so why were these mistakes? Because these mistakes were Hitler's decisions. Okay, Hitler wanted to attack Britain and attack the Soviet Union at the same time. The generals advised against it, but Hitler insisted on doing it for maybe political reason. Maybe he want to flex and show that he can do it. Maybe he want to win a quick war, a big war on both sides. Okay, so it leads to Germany's defeats because poor military decisions will hinder Germany's ability to recover and regroup. It loses its chance to defeat their enemies. And eventually, if you don't defeat their enemy, what happens? The enemy will come and defeat you later on. Okay, so it led to Germany's defeat in the end. Okay, number 2. Okay, second sub-factor, Germany's weakness, inappropriate use of resources and military funds. Okay, so they had military funds and resources from conquering so much territory, but they did not always use it well. For example, Hitler wanted the up-to-date weaponry in some weapons being mass-produced before they were actually tested on the battlefield. So Hitler invented a lot of weapons that he thought was very good, but actually not very practical. Some of the examples, I didn't write it here, but you can think of it as maybe the V1. There were this thing called the V1, V2 rockets. Basically, they were very big rockets that were fired from land. Okay, fired from land to hit, to fly for a long distance before it hits their targets from afar, like in Britain. But they were always not often the most accurate. It's not worth the cost. So sometimes German wasted a lot of resources. It looked good, a weapon, very big rocket to fire and hit the allies, but it was not very practical. Okay, as a result, because you wasted resources on not the most useful weapons, it led to a shortage of other practical, important weapons. Okay, and one thing very important you might have neglected the manufacture of important things like clothing, equipment. And eventually, one of the reasons why Germany lost the war because he lost to Russia, because Russia got very cold, and they found that we did not make enough coats to keep our soldiers warm, and it was one of the decisive factors that led to their failed invasion of Russia. Okay, so Hitler wanted to come up with a lot of big and fancy weapons, but neglected other things. Okay, so it increased Germany's likelihood of defeat. So here I'm explaining again why they are defeated, because it did not have the most effective resources for its usage. You can even explain, okay, for example, since we did not manufacture important weapons, we are not able to win important wars like the war with Russia, and Russia was able to counterattack later and ultimately push Germany back all the way back to Berlin and defeat it there. Okay, so it effectively destroyed Germany's chance at defeating Russia, destroyed Germany's chance at defeating other countries. Okay. Third point, heavy reliance on petroleum. Germany relied a lot on petroleum. Actually, a lot of countries rely on petroleum in those days. Okay, because besides petroleum, there was mainly coal, and coal was not very cumbersome. Okay, so Germany needed a lot of oil. They seized a lot of oil fields in Nazi-occupied territory. So what's the problem with relying on oil? Because the Allies were later on able to bomb a lot of Germany's oil plants. Okay, and when you rely on one resource altogether, and oil is flammable, right? You bomb the oil plant explodes, everything catch fire, everything burns down very quickly with a lot of you can imagine a big explosion happening. So Germany's efforts was grounded to a halt because it relied so much on oil. So maybe they should rely on other sources of materials as well. Okay, so increase Germany's likelihood of defeat as we have insufficient fuel. So with insufficient fuel, why will it defeat? Because you cannot operate your war machine. You cannot operate your war machine, your war efforts get hindered because you are at a clear disadvantage. You cannot fight a war without oil. You can't fight a war if your tanks cannot move, your vehicles cannot move. Okay, you cannot fight a war if you don't have oil or you don't have power to supply your factories to manufacture weapons. Okay, so it's very important. Okay, last but not least, Germany's miscalculation. Just now we mentioned Hitler made a mistake on insisting on fighting on two fronts. This is one of the biggest mistakes he ever made. Okay, because while he was still fighting Britain, before Britain surrendered, before he destroyed Britain, okay, he chose to split his forces and invade the Soviet Union as well. So when you have to fight on two sides, okay, it will be a distraction, okay, because your forces will not be concentrated. You should have concentrated your effort on one theater of war. That means you should have wiped out Britain first, transfer your force to the east, then you fight Russia. But Hitler chose to attack both at the same time because he think he will have a good chance at attacking the Soviet Union. Okay, because he thought, okay, the USA will not join in, okay, and defend Britain. Okay, he thought Britain will fall sooner or later, so might as well start and attack USSR first. Okay, so that was a very costly mistake. Okay, and you can again explain if your forces are diluted, not concentrated, how will it lead to your defeat? You cannot win battles, you lose the battles, you lose forces, you become weaker, eventually you'll lose the war. Okay, increase the likelihood of Germans defeat, your war is spread too thin. Okay, and effectively on each side of the front, eastern front and western front, east meaning with the Russians, west with Britain and the other allies, you have less troops on each side, you are at the manpower and resources disadvantage. Okay, so usually I like to explain like this, just to sum up. Okay, maybe there's a factor. Okay, I will explain how does it affect the battle. Battle means like, you know, the fight at the ground. How does losing the battle affect the war? War, it consists of many battles. So you keep losing your battle, you lose the war, and Germany will be defeated eventually, okay, when you lose the war. So usually I like to explain, okay, for example, if I fight a war on two fronts, I'll lose the battle on the western front or the eastern front because I'm at a disadvantage. You lose the battle already, you retreat, you lose some more battles, eventually you lose the war. And when you lose the war already, you're left with nothing, Germany is defeated. Okay, so that's the line of explanation I usually like to recommend my students to do. Okay, so you can see from a few cartoons here, Russia is obviously way too powerful. Hitler should not have underestimated Russia. Maybe some will say Hitler should not have even attacked Russia because it's a very powerful adversary, as seen by this big bear. Okay, Russia again portrayed very strongly. Hitler puts himself in the jaws of the Russian bear. Okay, so showing that the Russians were perhaps too dangerous for Germany. Okay, last factor before I end the video, Allied resistance. So we talk about how the USA helped. We talk about how the Germans, they sort of sabotage themselves. And now we're going to look at the other allies, the Soviets, the British, and other occupied countries, how they resisted Germany's offensive long enough for them to later turn the tide and counterattack and defeat Germany. Okay, so let's look at a few countries, the Soviet Union again, Britain, and other resistance group in Nazi-occupied Europe. Okay, so remember the Nazis occupied Europe. One example could be the French. Okay, you know, although the country surrendered, some of them may continue to still want to fight. Okay, so let's look at the Soviet Union first. So at first, okay, the Nazis, they signed this non-aggression pact right before they attacked Poland, but Hitler broke the pact when by going and attacking the Soviet Union, invade the rest of Poland, attack the Soviet Union. And as a result, the Soviet Union decide, okay, since you betray me, I'll go and ally with your enemy. So Soviet Union go and form an alliance with the Britons. Okay, so although the British never really liked the Soviet Union because one is communist, one is a democratic country, but because they had a common enemy, so they decided to ally together. Okay, at first the Soviet faced a lot of losses because Germany was still on the roll, very strong. Okay, using this thing called a blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg, you think of it as lightning war. So basically, it means you attack your enemy so fast that before they cannot react, they lost the city, lost the battle, lost the city, then they surrender. Okay, but although Germany wanted to attack fast and furious, Russia was a very big country and they proved to have a very strong resistance. The land was very big. You cannot blitz your way through so many land. It was too big. You need to consolidate very slowly. Okay, and the Russian winter also helped because it was so cold. When you're so cold, you can imagine, very painful to fight a war. So everything slowed down, and it allowed the Soviet time to reorganize its army, maybe bring the army from the other parts of the country to the battlefront here, and eventually, when the soldiers arrive, they are reinforced and they can turn the tide against Germans. Okay, so reorganize basically means they bring maybe their soldiers from east to west to fight the Germans. Okay, so for example, in the Battle of Stalingrad, okay, they were able to secure a decisive victory. Good of you to know some of these examples. Then when you explain, oh, the Soviets were able to reorganize in the Battle of Stalingrad, it makes your paragraph looks more and more convincing. Okay, so they defeated a lot of the German force on the Eastern Front. Okay, so how do you lead to Germany's defeat? Because with defeat, you lead to more defeat. More defeat, your troops may be demoralized. Eventually, you will retreat from the Eastern Front. Eventually, you retreat all the way back to Germany and be defeated there. Okay, so again, step by step, how does one thing leads to another thing? Okay, when you explain your factor. Okay, video again, you can go on YouTube and watch yourself if you are interested. Okay, B, now we are looking at how did the British resist German invasion. So when you look at British resistance, we are looking at the Battle of Britain, which is Germany's attempt at trying to conquer Britain. Okay, at first they were quite close to success. Okay, but eventually Hitler made some changes to the strategy. They gave Britain time to recover. Okay, if you are interested to know, okay, at first the German Air Force, okay, at first the German Air Force was attacking military targets, attacking military airbase. Okay, but after that, Hitler changed his mind, say, hey, you know what? Attacking military airbase is not interesting. I want to scare the British into surrender. He decided to attack civilians in cities. Okay, so every day they start bombing cities like London, bomb, kill innocent civilians, make people's life very difficult. But what was the downside with this strategy? If you attack cities, you can attack fewer airbase, and the airbase, some of them at first many were destroyed, but they had breathing space. They were able to repair and build out their air force again to counter attack later. So some tactical errors helped British to resist German invasion. They were quite lucky that Hitler changed that strategy. Okay, so at first, okay, the British could have surrendered if their willpower is very weak, but they have very high morale and determination. Okay, Germany, although they bombed civilian cities, they did not surrender. In fact, they grew even stronger and said, you know, we're going to persevere and survive this. So the German offensive was basically not very successful. Okay, so how did that ensure Germany's defeat? Because increased Germany's defeat because he was unable to defeat the British, and later on the British will work together with the Soviet and USA to turn the tide through Operation Overlord, which is attacking Europe back again. Okay, so you basically, in a nutshell, you cannot defeat your enemy. Enemy will become stronger, later you'll come back and counter-attack you, and you lose your battles, then you lose your war. Okay, so remember the logical explanation. Okay, besides Britain, besides Soviet Union, there are other resistance movements in Nazi-occupied European countries. Okay, one example you can mention maybe is Yugoslavia. What do? They provide maybe information to the allies on, you know, where are the military bases, where are the German soldiers at, so that the allies can plan, you know, where to attack, where to avoid. Okay, they provide a lot of behind the lines support. Maybe they did a lot of sabotage actions, so you can mention they did a lot of sabotage as well. Besides providing spy, okay, so vital is spying, right? They spy for information. They also help to sabotage by, you can imagine, okay, blow up important infrastructure like railways, factories, okay, to make life difficult for the Germans who are occupying such a big territory. Okay, so how did they lead to Germany defeat? Because of the sabotage. You can say, you know, Germany cannot deploy its troops on the fronts quickly, and you cannot ensure that success in your battles very effectively. You can imagine, like, okay, the troops cannot reach to your battlefront in time to reinforce, so therefore they lost the battle there, and then eventually they lose the war. Okay, you can also say, oh, spying will lead to Germany's defeat because it helped the allies to make the best strategies on how to defeat Germany. It helps the Soviet Union to make the best strategies on how to defeat Germany. Okay, and this will increase the chance at winning the battle, increase the chance at winning the war. So again, explain how they win battles, and how they will win war, and eventually they win Germany. Okay, so this is usually how I like to explain it. Okay, how the factor affected the battles, and then it affects the war. Okay, so these are the three factors. As I said, you must know all the three big factors well. Okay, and in each of the big factor, try to know the sub factors well also. because sometimes I can test you among the sub-factors. Okay, so that is it. Okay, thank you for watching. I wish you all the best in your revision. Bye bye.